Welcome to our first Micromobility Report podcast, where we'll discuss how we can all go further with less. I'm your host, Phil Lutz, publisher of Micromobility Report. Today, we're talking with Philip and Irene from the technology company See.Sense. Hello, Philip and Irene. How are you?
Hello. Good to see you and speak with you.
Hey, Phil, great.
Indeed. And I should add that you're up in sunny Brisbane. Is it sunny there today?
It's actually a little overcast today, which is maybe a welcome change. We've had a very, very hot summer, and now it's starting to cool. We're starting to get a bit of a break, and things are cooling down a bit. So
which is quite an adjustment from Ireland, which we'll get to in a minute, or more particularly Northern Ireland. But can you both give us a brief summary of your corporate careers? You've had interesting corporate careers before founding See.Sense. So perhaps a little bit of your background before we plunge into See.Sense itself.
Go first, Phil.
Sure. So I'm Philip McAleese. I'm co-founder and CEO here at See.Sense. After studying a degree in electronic and software engineering at university, I did a few years in air traffic control, designing simulation systems for the British government. Then moved into financial software and developed and maintained trading systems for investment banks. And as we'll come to a bit later, that was really where the story of See.Sense started. I was a busy executive with no time at the gym, and like many of us do, took up cycling to get some exercise back into an otherwise busy daily routine.
Awesome. And what about you, Irene?
So I actually studied originally psychology and workplace health and safety, and my graduate first career was actually working for Queensland Rail here in Brisbane. But in the last 20 years, I've been overseas, and I worked for large management consulting firms like Accenture, running change programs, mostly workplace transformation programs for large corporates. So lots of stakeholder management and project management expertise, I guess, along the way.
Okay, so clearly you're highly employable people working for very big organisations. So what motivated you to ditch the safety of salaries and plunge into the risky world of a technology startup? So how did it come about?
I think there were really two things that brought that about. First of all, whenever we went on holiday and we encountered other people's businesses, we quite often thought we could do that better. And after the arrogance of deciding that we could do that for so long, we thought we better put our money where our mouth is and give it a go ourselves and see, was it actually true and could we do it better? And the other thing was that I was working in client-facing technology for an investment bank in Singapore. And so I took up cycling to get this exercise back into my daily routine. And I was traveling along a really varied type of infrastructure. So everything from shared paths with pedestrians to part of the closed Formula One track and of course the road as well. And I didn't always feel safe on that commute, much as I enjoyed it. And so I wanted something that would improve my visibility and safety. And I looked around and saw that cars since 2011 all had visible running lights, because in Europe they recognized that it reduced collisions between vehicles in the daytime between 5 and 10%. And so I figured, well, something as big as a car needs it to be seen in the daytime, then me as a cyclist, I could do with that as well. And so I was looking at the smartphone on my handlebars one day and realized that a lot of the sensor technology that I'd studied at university, that was very cutting edge then, was now very mainstream and accessible. And so I thought, well, what if we took the smart sensor technology commonly found in mobile phones, integrated into the light to give it situational awareness so it can flash brighter and faster in times of higher risk and conserve energy when it's not, then we can have something that is truly daylight visible, bright enough to be seen, at any time of day, but still be quite small and compact because it's using its energy efficiently, and it's not going to need to be a big unit with, an external battery and lots of wires as would otherwise be the case. And so at the bank that I was working for, there was a large global cycling community, and I posted on the forum there and said, hey, I'm getting back into cycling, having not really been on a bike since I was a teenager. What do you guys think of this concept? And over the course of the next couple of days, I got more than 100 replies that said, this is fantastic, and if you make one, can you make one for me as well? And so that was really the catalyst we needed. Having accidentally done that initial market research, we went ahead and gave up our corporate careers. We wanted to move to either Australia or Northern Ireland for personal reasons as well, because we just had our second child and wanted a bit more family support. And so everything came together. We moved to Northern Ireland and founded See.Sense.
I'd probably add to that Phil does have an inventive mind. There'd been a couple of other potential business ideas that he had been thinking of at the time. But this one is the one that I think really resonated with me, Phil, because I thought, actually, this is something that if we can improve safety for cycling and therefore help get more people onto bikes, you just see already that bigger vision of getting more people on bikes. That helps to reduce congestion and pollution in our cities, improves people's health. And if we're going to give up our corporate careers, it has to be something that you could be passionate about and something that, it's actually, I didn't know then how much of a hard slog and just how hard it would actually be having a startup as well. But I'm really glad that we have that foundation of this is actually something that we can feel we're making hopefully some kind of dent in the world a little bit, and it keeps us motivated as we go through, because you've got that underlying kind of interest and genuine passion in it, rather than, I guess, just some business idea that you might have dreamt up to, see a gap in the market.
Yeah. So, you've already explained that See.Sense, started as a tail light company, if you like, but it's a tail light with a difference, isn't it? It's not really about the tail light, but the secret sauce inside. So could you enlighten us as to what's actually inside and what it lets you do beyond just being a tail light? Because obviously there's, even when you started, there were already a lot of them on the market.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We describe it, or we used to describe it as like Formula One telemetry for bikes. So we've got a number of sensors on there that we run at up to 800 times per second. And then we run it through AI, which allows us to profile and understand both the environment around the cyclist, but actually what the cyclist is doing as well. And so it gives us really, really great insights around not just where people go, but actually what their experiences are, where the infrastructure is working, where it can be improved. And so I guess if we kind of compare it to, say, floating car data, so connected car data, the early generations of that, you had, indications of where, say, the anti-lock brakes were being triggered or where the stability control was being triggered. As time has moved on and those systems have become more complicated or more, I guess, advanced, we're now getting things like the forward warning, so where the car is detected an imminent collision with a cyclist, a pedestrian, another car, and it will report those back as well. But they're still not quite at the level where they're individually profiling the driver, which is where a lot of insurance companies would really love to get to, because they can't make certain that their black boxes registering journeys that are being taken by the learner driver, not by their parents or somebody more experienced. We can actually tell all of that. We've been using AI for the last 10 years, way before ChatGPT made it cool. And so we can actually understand the experience of the cyclist and their I guess, competency and fluidity at being able to ride a bike. And so what that allows us to do is, if you imagine you've got a less experienced cyclist, someone that's just started, they'll tend to react to everything as they come upon it. And so their inputs into the bike will be fairly abrupt. There'll be sharp spikes and acceleration and swerving and that sort of thing. Whereas an experienced cyclist will tend to look further ahead, anticipate more, and generally react less. And when they do react, they'll also apply the brakes less quickly. So in order to get this kind of data from the bike and make it useful, you've got to standardize it. And so our AI, because we understand the experience and level of the rider, allows us to see what's normal for that rider. And so what we're actually scoring is not an abrupt acceleration, deceleration, or swerve or anything like that. It's actually how far outside the normal envelope of performance that the cyclist is. And that allows us then to see, doesn't matter whether you're just beginning on your cycling journey or you've been cycling for 20 years and are very experienced, we can get a standard reading for every time that you're caught out by, a pothole that you didn't see until the last moment, a pedestrian potentially going to step out in front of you, a car that you think is going to overshoot a junction, and so on. And so we're able to build up these really, really rich data sets by aggregating that across, more than 100,000 cyclists, many, many, millions of journeys and billions of sensor readings. to really give never before seen data around where our cities are working and where perhaps they can be looked at in more detail and improved.
And I guess Philip has talked there quite a lot about the data and how the data is different, but I think it's really important to remember as well that these actually are bike lights that are out in the market that compete against other bike lights that are for sale, and there's lots of use cases back for the cyclists themselves. So all those sensors that are inside the light, Phil, are actually, they do react to their environment as well. So when the cyclist is filtering through traffic, going through a roundabout, approaching headlights from a car, the light does detect that and it's going to flash brighter and faster. And that's one of the things that actually has made our bike lights quite popular, this reactive element, because of course when the light reacts by flashing brighter and faster in those scenarios, what it's doing is it's daylight visible, it's bright, but then it's able to conserve its battery power at other times. And so what you get is a daylight visible bike light with a really long run time, more than 15 hours on a charge. And that's why we've become British Cycling's preferred bike light supplier, Cycling Ireland's preferred bike light supplier, which is great because it's not just tech for tech's sake. It's actually an excellent bike light that cyclists do really love to use, and also it has this connected features.
So what motivation is there for the cyclist to share their data? And this will be about a triple barrel question, all right? So number one, what motivation is there? Related to that, do you have customers who buy the light but then don't share the data? And number three, just to confirm the mechanics of sharing that data, is they have to link it through their phone via an app and live upload. Is that correct? So could you answer those three questions?
Yeah. So when people buy our bike light, they can choose to share their data. So it's very, very transparent. They opt in using the app if they want to share their data. And it's important to remember that when we share their data, we're sharing only aggregate anonymized data with the cities. So really they're not looking at their individual journey, because that's actually not so interesting as the patterns that emerge out of that, where we're seeing swerving or braking, etc. at a junction. That pattern is far more interesting than the individual journey. But anyway, we're only sharing aggregated data. So it is completely optional. We actually have a really high percentage of our users who do opt in, because when they opt in, we also provide or unlock quite a lot of other features in the app. So the app has a crash detection alert. So if they do have a crash, it would send their location to their nominated contact. It's got a theft alert in it as well. So if your bike is moved and you're not on it, works over Bluetooth, so it's about 100-meter range, but it would send you a notification. And you get low battery notifications. So if your battery level is low, you would get an alert. And you also get your own personal ride stats back through there as well, which people quite enjoy seeing. So how many calories they've burnt or how much CO2 they've saved as well. So there's a lot of connected features in the app that they unlock as a kind of reward for sharing their aggregated anonymized data. But I will say that when we have surveyed our community, there's a lot of, those things I've spoken about are the what's in it for me, the individual, benefit of unlocking those features in the app. But there is an element of a large proportion of our cyclists who just generally want to see that data contribute to the wider good. Okay. Knowing that this data can be used to help improve conditions for all cyclists in the city is a motivating factor for many cyclists who want to share that data. And certainly on the projects we do with cities, where we work with cities to deploy these lights, that's actually one of the main overriding considerations.
Okay. So just the third part of that triple barrel question about the connectivity with the smartphone. So is it a live feed, or is it stored and then uploaded at the end of a ride, or how does it work?
Yeah, so there's a Bluetooth connection maintained between the light and the app as you cycle around. And so it's using the app to buffer the data. We do then collect it up and send it intermittently just to make it more efficient from a data usage perspective. And if you don't have any connectivity at that stage, it'll wait for Wi-Fi and upload it later.
Okay.
We also make it really obvious when we're collecting data and when we're not, although it has to ask for data collection to be available when the app is not in focus or not on the screen. That's just because you're going to have your phone locked whenever you're cycling around. There's nothing more sinister than that. But we make sure that we actually only collect data whenever the light is connected to your phone. So you see a blue flashing light to indicate the Bluetooth on the light. And also when the light is flashing, so when it's turned on. So if the light's not on, it's not connected to your app, it's not connecting data. And if it is, then it is. So that's really simple.
Okay. Now, you've mentioned cities about 3 times now, Irene, so we'll move on to that. And from a city's perspective, how can cities use your data to improve micromobility?
Mm-hmm. So I think cities at the moment are getting more and more interested. Active travel's definitely come up the agenda, particularly post-COVID in many cities, and there's more and more investment starting to happen in building infrastructure to support that change. And this is really where data comes in, because up until now there's been very limited data from cycling. You would have the kind of count data from loops in the road, maybe some cameras mounted at junctions. You've got travel surveys. There is app data, the Strava or other sort of sports related ones, but these often can be quite skewed to particular groups. And really what cities are saying to us, and what we're hearing through many of the conferences and events and things that we participate in, is that they're, compared to other modes, cycling data is less available. So cars, for example, just have so much more data about them. And when cities are planning how to model and resource for transport, they've got all this data from cars, but there's very little data from cycling. And the real gaps that exist for the cycling data around safety, understanding the experience of cyclists on the different infrastructure. There's gaps around having representative data from different types of cyclists. So as mentioned, not just all skewed to the athlete end of the spectrum, trying to understand how women or different other commuters move around the cities. And so really what we're doing at See.Sense is really trying to help fill some of those gaps while complementing some of the other sources of data that are out there. So
can we, I'm just going to interrupt because I know 2 things I'd like to specifically ask you about that I've heard you talk about before, that your light can detect near misses rather than have to wait for people to be killed in crashes. And the second one is that you can even detect a pothole before a pothole is there, like the conditions that a pothole is likely to form. So can you just very briefly elaborate on both of those 2 characteristics?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the near misses, people imagine that there's some sort of sensor that is detecting cars in the vicinity of the bike and reacting to that. It's actually looking at the individual rider, and understanding what's normal for them. So a near miss event, we're measuring the reaction of the individual to that near miss. So it can be as a car or lorry drafts too close to the rider, it'll cause an upset and causes a left-right wobble. So we can detect that. But more frequently, what we're actually seeing is a brake or swerve event that's unusual. So a little bit like if you imagine you do an emergency stop in a car, it's not really about how hard you press the brakes, it's how suddenly. It's going from a normal condition to suddenly applying a reasonable amount of force. And so we measure exactly the same thing on the bike. And that's where our profiling of the rider really comes in, to understand what constitutes an emergency brake for them, because cyclists will brake with varying differences of deceleration. And actually they can brake quite hard coming down a hill towards a junction, for example. So we need to be a lot more nuanced and understand that a lot better. And so that's where we worked actually with the Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents in the United Kingdom to really evidence that these indications that we were collecting around abnormal braking and swerving correlated with Stats 19, which are the UK's police reports where somebody is injured or killed in a collision. And so what we saw is that you're 2.5 times more likely to brake or swerve abnormally in proximity to one of these known locations than at other locations. And so we were able to see, clusters around where we'd seen large numbers of collisions. And we also seen indications where there hadn't been collisions, indicating, potentially areas for further research or study. By extrapolation of that, we then looked at some of the cycling infrastructure, which was put in a temporary way in COVID. So we were able to see the before and after picture. And in places like Park Lane in London, where a lane went in, we were able to see overnight, literally on the construction date of the infrastructure, that the abnormal swerving and braking behaviour just disappeared. It just wasn't there anymore, indicating what we think is a very successful deployment of infrastructure. And so because these abnormal events are much more common than the collisions, it's obviously much easier then to put in some infrastructure, do a before and after, and really understand what sort of impact, if any, you've had. And we have seen where infrastructure has gone in and it's gone the other way. It's created a smaller issue or a problem in a particular location or area. So generally the overall effect is good, but sometimes we can highlight some little more tweaks that are needed within infrastructure.
I think I was just going to say, a lot of people be familiar with the pyramid where you have, the deaths and serious injuries at the top of the pyramid, and underneath this you've got sort of the near misses, which is essentially massively underreported, right? So what Phil's explaining there is essentially that our data on those swerving and braking extreme events can be used as like a surrogate safety measure to start to understand what's happening underneath there. And this is really critical for, initiatives like Vision Zero, which Australia has signed up to, which is about creating zero road deaths by 2050 here in Australia, and a lot of other cities around the world have signed up to this. And what you find, Phil, is that, there's only so much low-hanging fruit that you can get by reducing speed and doing these other things, seat belts, etc. What you really have to do to then make that transition down to zero is becoming a lot more proactively focused on preventing crashes. And this is where the more understanding you can have about the contributory factors and the more data that you have to baseline before and after any intervention is starting to become critical in getting those percentage gains that are needed towards that outcome for Vision Zero. So safety is a huge area of interest for cities now going forward, and we're definitely seeing a lot of appetite for our data for that in that regard.
Okay, so we've been talking a lot at the higher level overview of what your equipment can do, your software, your programming, etc. Let's do at least, say, 2, perhaps even 3 specific examples. So you founded in 2013, so you're 11 years in now. So just to put you on the spot, if you would like to think over those past 11 years of maybe your best 1, 2 or 3 case studies, specific, where you can name a specific city and a project and the outcome, just within a couple of minutes, not in huge detail, what would you pick? You can fight over it if you like. Or,
Well, I think that there's definitely 2 standouts. Phil already mentioned the work with ROSPA in Birmingham, but I think what a really interesting project is the follow-on project for that with Transport for London. So Transport for London actually wanted to replicate that work that we did with ROSPA, and we did this at scale, working in partnership with Transport for London, using See.Sense data across London to help them understand risk, so they can look at risk. They've signed up for Vision Zero, so they're using car data on swerving and braking from some car manufacturers as one of the data feeds that they would look at. They've got quite a sophisticated team. They'll look at things like all sorts of open data, the width of the road, the speed of cars, etc., and literally build up a risk model street by street across London. And they actually said to us that the missing piece of the puzzle for them was having this kind of data from Micromobility. And this is where we completed a really successful proof of concept to demonstrate that our data could fill that gap. And we're really proud that this project went on to not only receive a commendation from CIHT, but also just in December got the Prince Michael International Road Safety Award, which is one of the most prestigious awards you can win in road safety. And so this has really laid a fantastic platform for us to continue to collaborate with data aggregators in the field that work with large cities to ingest data. And now we've got a proven data feed that helps to elevate what they're doing in that regard. So that would be one project. Phil, you maybe want to talk about our great project here in Melbourne with the TAC?
Very much so. So, yeah, I mean, I'm super proud and delighted to be working with the Transport Accident Commission in Melbourne, where in conjunction with iMove and one of the local universities deployed more than 1,000 of our lights to cyclists in the greater Melbourne region. That's led to lots of really interesting outcomes, and we're now working with a number of LGAs, local government authorities, and we developed this idea of a core insight report. So one of the challenges that the LGAs have is that they don't always have enough people with GIS experience to be able to make use of this data and really understand it. And so in collaboration with the TAC, we've been able to develop this tool that allows them to use it in a much more accessible and convenient way. So there's a number of pieces of infrastructure that are being designed and built at the moment, and we're helping them to do that before and after analysis to understand where it should go, a little bit about how it should be designed, and then to evidence once it's been built how it's actually performing. So really delighted about that.
Last one.
Okay.
I could probably slip in another two, but I'll go for one. Last one, I think.
No, you're only allowed to have one. I said up to three. I'm going to be very strict.
Okay, so I think the last one, an example I'll use is our project in Essex, working with Essex County Council. And I'm pulling out this example because it shows the evolution of our technology, really, because we started out with bike lights, but now we work with integration of our technology into bike fleets and e-scooters as well. And this is a really interesting project in Essex where they got funding to actually provide bikes to people living in deprived areas in Essex. And then they wanted to understand if those bikes were actually being used to access transport, education, shopping, these kind of things, and then also to build out infrastructure to support that. They had no data there at all. I mean, there are no Strava riders in this particularly deprived area of Essex. We started the project with 100 bikes. It's now scaled up to 2,000 bikes. And we've worked in conjunction with the project to design data dashboards, because one of the interesting things, Phil, is cities need to be able to use the data that's collected. You know, we can have this really fantastic data, but at the end of the day, if it sits on the shelf and isn't used, that's a problem. And I'm really proud of this project because we worked with them to co-design data dashboards. They could pull down reports. They can share the reports with the funders to evidence the usage of the bikes from behavioural change. But they're also using the data to literally build our infrastructure to support. So they've built parking, for example, bike parking, from analysis of the origin destination of journeys, plus the dwell times and where people are locating their bikes. They've also used the data to do before and after analysis of a piece of cycle infrastructure that went in and show the impact that it's having. So yeah, I think it's a good example because it shows that our technology can be used, not just the bike lights, but to integrate onto bikes, and also then really practical support we're providing with local authorities to actually use the data and not sit on the shelf.
Yeah, it would be really satisfying when you know that, hey, something I've done has resulted in physical, literal, sometimes concrete changes.
Yeah, like that was when they built the parking, that was serious high five from everybody in the team, because it was like, I don't say, they built bike parking, but, you know, to go from, you know, data to insight, and then from insight to action, which is a buzzword of, you know, actionable insights. Yeah, they actually put a spade in the ground and dug the parking. So that is the happiest day for us to see that happening from the data. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. we're coming to the end. I've only got two more questions or two more topics to touch on. Firstly, I believe you've got an exciting new product that you've been working on that you might be ready to speak about publicly for the first time in terms of going beyond just the tail light for the reason to collect the method of collecting the data.
Yeah, so the project in Essex, we've been using a product called Summit, which allows us, it's got its own cellular connection, so it doesn't require the phone to be connected via an app, which means that bike fleets can much more easily be connected. So we used it with, dot scooters in London and bike fleets in Essex and other places. We actually have a super efficient battery variant of that called Summit B that is in final development at the moment. And this is both a consumer product, which will be marketed under a different name, but also a fleet management product. Really, the benefit of that is that it's very, very easy. You just fit it to the bike and go. And unlike most bike trackers, which require, recharging or battery replacement every few weeks, we have been successful in being able to allow this to track for thousands of miles over many months. So it's really quite game-changing technology, and it's not too far away from being launched.
Excellent. And the final question I've got for you is, what other developments do you hope to see in the future, both for looking at the bigger picture of micromobility and cities in general, and for See.Sense in particular?
Well, I think that, there's a very exciting opportunity here for micromobility going forward, because, the global micromobility market, I think the report from McKinsey that I highlighted at the recent APCC conference is talking about the micromobility market reaching $360 billion by 2030. That's nearly double what it is now. A lot of this is coming from e-bike sales in Europe. But what's really interesting is the appetite for people to want to use micromobility, that's bikes and e-scooters, alongside or with, private vehicles. I think that the big challenge for cities going forward is reallocating space to make that happen in cities, to make it happen safely so that you can get that shift and that you can attract a wide range of users. It's not just the brave and fearless who are feeling that they can navigate their way amongst the traffic. It's really thinking about how you allocate the space and how you design to, incorporate these modes. And this is where data has to play a huge role in this going forward for modelling and understanding the movements and the experience of users in this space, and really stepping into this huge void in the data gap that exists in that area. So I really think that there's a large opportunity there for SMEs, innovative SMEs like ourselves, to play a part in helping to shape our cities going forward. We can move quickly, we can apply innovation, and we can work very collaboratively with lots of different partners to co-create outcomes as well. And I think that's part of the excitement, is that knowing there's no silver bullet, there's no one data source that solves everything, there's no one player that knows everything. I think that the going forward, partnerships, collaboration, innovation are critical to overcoming what needs to be achieved. And this is something that I think builds on a lot of our strengths in See.Sense. And so I definitely see that we should have a good role in that going forward.
And
excellent. Yeah, any thoughts from you, Philip? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to add to that, I mean, I obviously have a very much technology focus, and I think what is apparent to me is that the market has really matured in terms of, 10 years ago when 2015, we started connecting this type of data, and cities just weren't ready to consume it. They hadn't really used connected car data. It was very new. Certainly nobody had heard of AI, and nobody believed what its capabilities might be. And so I think with a lot more of the prevalence of connected car data and AI and cities' willingness to sort of consume and use that data in making decisions. I think it's a very exciting time for companies like ourselves and others to engage, to bring lots of different data sources and insights together. And largely what we're doing is providing that missing piece for micromobility that is very difficult to get over and above just where people are going, but actually what their experience is and how we can leverage that, look at all modes and create a holistic picture across our cities.
Well, Irene and Philip, I think you to be congratulated for the unbelievable amount of work you've done in your first decade of business. And it's certainly very exciting, everything that you're doing and talking about potentially doing in the future. So thank you very much for being on the Micromobility Podcast.
Thank you, Phil.
Yep, our pleasure.
It's been a pleasure, yeah.
Thank you again.
So thanks everyone for listening. We're planning to do one Micromobility Report podcast per month. If you want to find out more, visit the podcast page at micromobilityreport.com.au, and until next time, keep riding.